They say the past has a way of circling back, not with whispers, but with thunder, crashing into the life you've built when you least expect it. For Emma Lawson, that thunder came on an ordinary Tuesday, in a place as unremarkable as a diner filled with the clatter of dishes and the smell of burnt coffee. And if you've ever believed that life can break you down only to build you back up again, make sure you like this story, share it, and subscribe for more, because what you're about to witness is not just about a single mom facing a medical crisis. It's about fate dragging an old love out of the shadows when her survival depended on it. By the time Emma stumbled through the swinging door of the kitchen that afternoon, she had already been running on fumes for weeks. The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly against the gray Boston sky outside, and inside, the air smelled of fried onions, grease, and exhaustion. Her apron was stained with coffee spills, and the weight of her tray dug into her sore arm as she tried to balance 2 plates of pancakes and a bowl of clam chowder that was already beginning to slosh dangerously over the rim. Her manager barked orders from the counter. Her coworker slid past her with a tray twice as full, and all Emma could think about was the stack of overdue bills waiting in the kitchen drawer at home. The electricity had already been cut off once this year, and Lily, sweet, bright-eyed Lily, only 7 years old, had asked the kind of questions no mother wanted to hear. "Mommy, are we poor?" Emma had smiled, tucked her daughter into bed, and whispered the only answer she could: "We're rich in love." But even love couldn't keep the lights on or pay for Lily's school shoes that were starting to pinch at the toes. The symptoms had been creeping in for weeks, though Emma convinced herself it was nothing. First, a faint tightness in her chest when she climbed the stairs to her third-floor walk-up apartment. Then, dizzy spells while rushing between tables. Sometimes her heartbeat felt like a drum being struck off rhythm, a hollow thud that left her breathless. She blamed the double shifts, the lack of sleep, the cheap black coffee that served as her lifeline. Single mothers didn't have the luxury of being sick. They pushed through, because if Emma didn't, no one else would. But that afternoon, fate decided she'd pushed too far. One moment, she was reaching across a booth to set down a steaming plate of pancakes, and the next, her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and the diner's chatter turned into a muffled roar. The tray clattered to the floor, dishes shattering as customers gasped. Emma tried to steady herself, clutching the edge of the table, but her body refused to listen. She collapsed, and the world tilted into darkness. When she came to, the fluorescent lights above her seemed too bright, and the smell of antiseptic replaced the greasy aroma of the diner. Panic clawed at her chest before she even opened her eyes fully. Where was Lily, who had picked her up from school? Was she safe? Emma tried to sit up, but a firm hand pressed gently against her shoulder. "Easy," a nurse said softly, her voice calm but steady. "You fainted. You're at Boston Memorial." Emma's lips parted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "My daughter, Lily, she's fine," the nurse interrupted, almost as if she had anticipated the question. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Harding, picked her up. We called her from your phone." Relief swept over Emma so fast her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she let herself sink into the thin hospital pillow, her body heavy with exhaustion. Then the reality settled in. Hospitals meant bills. Bills meant more debt. And debt meant choices she couldn't afford to make. Emma had worked so hard to keep herself and Lily afloat, scraping by on diner wages and a second job cleaning offices at night. This, whatever it was, could sink her completely. The nurse's expression was professional, but there was something in her eyes, hesitation, maybe even pity, that made Emma's stomach twist. "The doctor will explain more," she said, adjusting the 4-line in Emma's arm. "But we found some irregularities with your heart. It isn't just exhaustion." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Irregularities. Heart, not just exhaustion. Emma closed her eyes. She wanted to scream, to argue, to tell the nurse she didn't have time for irregularities. She had a daughter who needed her, a pile of bills, a life balanced on the edge of collapse. She couldn't afford to be sick. The door opened then, footsteps echoing in the sterile room. Emma braced herself, expecting some older doctor with kind eyes and a clipboard full of words she wouldn't understand. Instead, when she opened her eyes, the breath caught in her throat. Standing in the doorway was a man she hadn't seen in almost a decade, a man she had once loved so fiercely it still burned her to think of it. His dark hair was streaked faintly with gray now. His broad shoulders filled out the tailored coat of his white physician's jacket, and his face, sharp jaw, piercing eyes, was both familiar and utterly changed. Dr. Daniel Carter. Her Daniel, the boy who had once promised to love her forever, only to vanish when her world had crumbled. The man who had broken her heart in ways she had never truly recovered from. And now, impossibly, he was here, her doctor. For a long moment, neither spoke. The monitor beside Emma beeped in steady rhythm, marking the silence between them. Daniel's eyes flickered over her chart, then back to her face, his expression unreadable. Emma wanted to sit up, to demand answers, to ask why fate had decided to humiliate her by bringing him of all people into this moment of weakness. But her body was still too heavy, her chest still tight. "You're awake," Daniel said finally, his voice low, controlled, as though he too was bracing against a flood of memories. "Emma, you've been through a lot. We need to run further tests, but I'll be overseeing your case personally." Emma's throat tightened. Personally. The word felt like a blade. She wanted to refuse, to tell him to find someone else, anyone else. But fear clawed at her heart again, reminding her of the truth. Her body was failing, and this man, the man who had left her, might now be the only one who could save her. And as Daniel Carter stepped closer to her bedside, his eyes searching hers with something between guilt and determination, Emma realized that the past wasn't just circling back. It was about to crash straight into the fragile life she had fought so hard to build. The first night after Emma's collapse was the longest of her life. She lay in the hospital bed with her body weak, her mind racing, and the sound of the heart monitor filling the silence like a constant reminder of her fragility. Every rise and fall of that green line on the screen seemed to mock her determination to carry on alone, to prove she didn't need anyone, not even him. Yet when the door opened and Daniel Carter stepped inside, the room shifted. His white coat and practiced calm made him look like every other doctor in the hospital. But to Emma, he was still the ghost of the boy who had once held her future in his hands and then shattered it. He spoke with quiet authority, explaining test results, risks, and procedures with the precision of a man who had said these words 1,000 times before. But when he said her name, Emma, it didn't sound like a doctor addressing his patient. It sounded like a memory pressing its way back into the present. She wanted to hate him, and part of her did. He had walked away when she needed him most, leaving her to face motherhood alone, leaving her to cradle their daughter with no one at her side. She had raised Lily through fevers and tantrums, through birthdays and scraped knees, and never once had she allowed herself to reach out to him. Yet now, with her own body betraying her, she had no choice but to place her trust in the very man who had abandoned her. Pride and fear waged war inside her chest as Daniel laid out the facts. The defect in her heart was dangerous, progressive, and surgery was no longer a question of if, but when. Without it, he told her plainly, Lily might grow up without a mother. That thought struck harder than any diagnosis. Emma's voice trembled as she whispered her consent. Do it. And though she hated the tears burning her eyes, she couldn't deny the flicker of relief she saw in his. The days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm of vulnerability and confrontation. Nurses came and went, cheerful and efficient, while Daniel hovered at the edges of her world, sometimes stepping forward as her doctor, sometimes faltering as the man who had once loved her. He asked about her symptoms, her pain levels, her recovery, but his gaze often lingered too long, as if searching for the years they had lost. One evening, when the hospital grew quiet and the snow outside softened the city into silence, he surprised her by sitting beside her bed without a chart, without the armor of his profession. I should have called, he admitted, voice raw. I should have been there. Emma turned away, unwilling to let him see the tears that threatened to fall. Too much had happened, too many nights alone, too many sacrifices he would never understand. Still, something in his tone stirred the part of her heart she thought she had locked away forever. But there was more at stake than just her health or their unfinished past. Every time she thought of Lily, their daughter, waiting at home, Emma felt the weight of her secret pressing harder. Lily's brown eyes, so much like Daniel's, were proof of a truth Emma could no longer hide. Daniel didn't know. He didn't know that the child he passed in his memories of Emma still existed, flesh and blood, laughter, and tears. He didn't know he was already a father, and Emma knew that when he found out, the carefully controlled distance between them would shatter forever. She told herself she was protecting Lily, sparing her from the complications of a man who had chosen ambition over family. But deep down, she feared the truth. She feared that if Daniel knew, she might lose the little world she had built around her daughter. Yet she also feared the opposite, that Lily would look at him, see the father she had never known, and Emma would no longer be enough. The truth had waited 7 long years. Now, with her life on the line and Daniel by her side, it was only a matter of time before it broke free. The morning of the surgery arrived with a silence so sharp it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Emma lay beneath the sterile lights of the operating room, every nerve trembling with fear, yet when Daniel Carter's voice broke through the haze, low, steady, reassuring, she felt an anchor she hadn't expected. "You're safe, Emma. I've got you," he murmured before the anesthesia pulled her under. Hours blurred into heartbeats measured by machines, and in those hours, Daniel fought for her, as if every suture, every decision, every measured breath he coaxed into her fragile body was a chance to undo the choice he had made years ago when he walked away. When it was finally over, when her heart beat strong and steady again, he removed his mask, sweat dampening his hair, and allowed himself one fleeting moment to close his eyes, whispering a silent promise: never again. Recovery was slow, marked by the ache of healing and the fragility of a body relearning its strength, but Emma knew the heavier weight wasn't in her chest. It was in the secret she could no longer hold. The truth pressed harder each time Daniel sat by her bed, each time his gaze softened in ways that spoke of more than professional concern. It was on the 3rd evening, with the winter sun sinking in streaks of amber across the hospital window, that she finally broke. Lily had been visiting, curled up beside her mother's bed, chattering about school and crayons, her smile so wide it lit up the room. When she laughed, Daniel froze. The sound was unmistakable, a mirror of his own younger self. His eyes moved from Lily to Emma, questions forming silently, and Emma knew there was no longer any space left for lies. "She's yours," Emma whispered, her voice rough with both fear and relief. "Lily, she's your daughter." The silence that followed was both endless and immediate. Daniel's chest rose sharply, his hand gripping the chair as though the ground itself had shifted. He looked at Lily, at the small dimple on her cheek, the curve of her chin, all the pieces he now couldn't unsee, and when he finally spoke, his voice trembled with something Emma had never heard from him before: raw vulnerability. "All these years," he swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "All these years I missed her." Emma's heart clenched, prepared for anger, for blame, for regret sharp enough to cut. Instead, Daniel knelt by Lily's side, his voice gentle as he said, "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Daniel." Lily tilted her head, studying him with curiosity before offering the kind of innocent smile only a child could. "Your mommy's doctor," she said simply. "Mommy says doctors fix broken things." Daniel's eyes met Emma's over their daughter's head, and in that glance, she saw it, the possibility of forgiveness, the fragile seed of something new. In the days that followed, nothing was magically solved, but everything had changed. Emma's body healed, her heart stronger than it had been in years, and Daniel remained, not as a ghost from the past, but as a man determined to prove himself worthy of the family he had almost lost forever. Emma didn't offer easy forgiveness, and Daniel didn't ask for it. Instead, they began with small steps, quiet conversations, shared laughter at Lily's antics, the tentative weaving of lives long torn apart. And one snowy evening, as Emma walked slowly from the hospital, Lily's hand in hers and Daniel just a step behind, she realized the storm that had nearly broken her had also carried something else into her life: the chance to begin again. The future was uncertain, complicated, fragile, but for the first time in a very long time, it was also filled with hope.